What a privilege it is to get to sit down with a mom who is probably the most intriguing in the music business to so many
Oh, that's
people.
very kind of you to say.
Thank you for being here and taking the time.
I love being here. Your home is beautiful. You're adorable. And I'm so glad this worked out
Me
because,
too.
I mean, I know it's taken us a little beat to get it to happen. And
Yes.
thank you for being patient.
Oh my
And
goodness. You're jet setting all over the place and trying to keep up with four boys, five granddaughters. I mean, what a blessing.
it is such a blessing.
Yeah, your face lights up when I say those granddaughters.
I know. I love it. It's such an amazing thing to have granddaughters. It's so different than having sons or having my own children. I mean, being a grandmother is, I was not ready when I was told, and therefore I was given the name Glammy.
Which is so
Yeah,
perfect.
Glammy, same instead of
She's got the
grandma.
glammy beaded bracelet. Did one of the girls make that?
I think they had it made for me, but they've made me lots of little bracelets.
Oh, I'm
and I
sure.
love it.
That's so
I think
sweet.
it's so cute because I know they don't realize what they're saying. And when they finally figure it, Valentina, sorry, my second granddaughter, she recently said, Glammy, like glamorous.
She finally put it together.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, because
I'm
of
not
this
an
red
ordinary
lips, you know.
grandmother. I'm
Yeah,
a
I'm not.
glamorous grandmother.
Yes, I'm not boring.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. I bet you have so much fun with those girls.
Oh, I do have a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's
I don't
pretty
get to
awesome.
see them as often as would be wonderful to see them, but
Right.
we all live in different places, and
Yeah.
my husband and I are still going strong at. We're not like retirees yet. It's often they want us to be places that are a little far out of reach,
Right,
But
right.
we try to say yes as much as we can.
Go with the flow, I guess, as much as you can with
Yeah.
everybody's really, really busy schedules.
Exactly,
Yeah, for
exactly.
sure.
And you have to really be flexible.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I think I've learned the most in this journey is just to be flexible.
Yeah. You never know what's coming around the corner, right?
Exactly. Nesting and being stayed put is not something that I think was in the cards for me in my life.
Yeah, yeah. Not a lot of stability as far as like a set schedule. Like you couldn't be a type A person that just has to have every day planned out.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I was that way. I have to say, I mean, it's a miracle. Only with God's help that has been altered. I just learned. It took a while. It was like, everyone around me in my life, like my mother, my family members, outside of my family, they had to learn that no, I don't know how. I can't book a round trip ticket.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how long I'll be there or if I'm going to go there. And I also learned that I never travel without my passport because
Uh-oh, I bet there's a good
that
story
happened
there.
one time. Yes, there is a really good story there. I was in New York with my husband, and Nick was there, and he asked me to join him in Mexico. It was during his solo. I think that's correct. I could be wrong. I get things mixed up
You have to figure out which
all the
stage of-
time. Yeah. All I know is I was asked to go to Mexico with him because I was free over the next like 5 days, and I had had my passport overnighted from our home, wherever that was at the time.
We're already getting a good glimpse
Yeah.
of your life right here. So you had the passport overnighted to you in New York so that you could go to Mexico.
So I could go and get on the flight and go.
So now you keep it with you at all times.
Although I remember the one thing I do remember about that is that my luggage was lost and I had to buy all new clothes in Mexico City.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yes. That's one of the other
It was
hazards
fun.
of
Yeah, it was really
travel.
great. Yeah, so it all worked out great. Yeah.
Okay, take me back to when you and Kevin Sr. met.
Oh goodness, 39 years ago,
Oh my goodness.
we were both going to Bible college in Dallas, Texas. And it was registration morning. I hadn't moved into the campus yet. My dad and I went to the building that registration was happening in, and we were one of the first people outside the doors.
Is this freshman year of college?
Yes, well, the Bible college we went to was just a 2-year accredited college, and it still exists. It's called Christ for the Nations, and I had just turned 18.
Oh, wow.
I mean, like weeks earlier. And I saw him walking down the road towards the building, and he had I can tell you what he's wearing. He's wearing jeans that were really tight.
Skinny jeans?
And a green, yeah, a green T-shirt, which was later I found out was a church softball team T-shirt that he wore. And he had a little blue Bible in his hand. And I just watched him walk, and I was so intrigued. I don't know what, something just clicked in my spirit or inside me, and it's like, okay. And there was only, there was only half a dozen of us gathered. And we weren't talking. I mean, I wasn't talking to anybody because I was like nervous. This is college.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone. And there's these people that are really excited about the Lord, like my commitment. I was just, wow. And I had a conversation with him standing there in the registration line. And I was amazed at his reference to summer and what he had done over the summer. He was a camp counselor for these children, and I just thought, he is going to be a wonderful father.
That was your first thought?
Yes, that was my first
Was
impression.
it about the type of father you would be?
Isn't that crazy?
That is so interesting.
And everything I thought has come to pass. I just, I never, and he does not know his father. And, he didn't know how to be a father, but he just knew the love of his heavenly Father. And honestly, I always love to tell that story. Thanks for asking that, because I feel like it's just a true testimony. Mm-hmm.
And it tells a lot about you, about even at a young age, you knew what was going to be important to you for your future. I mean, you didn't know this journey that you were going to walk.
Absolutely not.
That has been quite the roller coaster with so many highs and some lows in between.
Oh, absolutely.
But to have such a supportive partner and for you to see something in him, it's interesting. It wasn't that he was cute. It wasn't that you're like, he might be fun to date, but you immediately went to the integrity of a man that you wanted to play a part in raising your children.
I have never thought of it that way. That's really good. Thank you. I like that. And I didn't know that he was such an amazing singer or such an amazing songwriter, that he was so gifted and talented. He was this fabulous worship leader. I had known nothing of those things about him.
You had an interest in music as well, right?
I did. I didn't feel like it would be my career, but it was also something I always was involved in throughout my younger years. I'm only basically 18 when I meet him.
Right.
So I was always in honor choirs, but it wasn't the drive that I wanted to do forever, or I never had an interest in becoming famous or in the music industry.
Yeah.
Never pursuing that. But he did. After I got to know him, I understood that about him. And it's interesting that we're here in Nashville, now. And early in our marriage, he would come to Nashville regularly when our children were like small, like babies, and he'd pound on every door on Music Row, and he'd walk those streets for days. And
wow.
I mean, he got to know a lot of people. He built a lot of connections, networks.
What was his goal when he was doing that?
He wanted to be a country music singer.
Really? Country
he thought
music?
He was going to be. Oh yeah.
Okay.
He recorded a whole album of country music. He recorded several, and
was he a songwriter?
yeah.
Okay.
He was. Yes, he was. He's written a lot of songs.
Yeah.
But it's like you were saying, like, you don't know what the future holds. Like in those days, I would never have dreamed that all of these things that he was learning and these connections that he was making and friendships would be valuable, 20, 30 years later.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, it really tells a story. There's a real story, and that we need to pay attention. And, something his grandfather always said is live like you're at the bottom, even if you're at the top. And that he passed on to our kids, our children. And because you never know, like you said, the highs and the lows, because those lows do come.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
It's just part of our journey.
So you had the three boys pretty close together, right? What is
Yes.
the age difference between?
Kevin is now 36, Joe is 33, and Nick is 30, and then Franklin is 22. So there was,
gap.
it was like 21 months, 3 years, and then there was a big gap between Nick and Frankie because 8 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted another one right away. And my husband was like, we were living in an apartment in Dallas, Texas. Kevin was leading worship for Christ for the Nations. We were directing a singing, sign language, and drama group for the college.
You were teaching sign language at the time, right?
During that time, I was not teaching, but I did after we left there and when we went to pastor in New Jersey.
Okay.
I taught.
Did you have a family member that had that drive in you to
No.
learn? Because it's not easy to learn sign language.
No, it was something that was the Bible college that we attended, Christ for the Nations, had a deaf department.
Oh.
They had opened a deaf department in the early days in hopes of seeing the deaf healed. But in so doing, they began to learn about the deaf community and their need to
Be able to communicate with them.
and to they were believers and they needed to help bring people to Christ that were deaf.
Yes.
And they learned about the need for that kind of work, and that's what grew the deaf department. And it was just so beautiful. I really learned from being immersed in that community. There was not a lot of deaf at the school, but that group was developed, and we traveled the world, and we were in deaf and hearing churches. And I got to I remember attending the Special Olympics in 1983, 84, and it was just remarkable to see like the expression. I'm very expressive with my hands, and I can, so learning sign language is very, it's fun because my brain seems to work that way. Have you learned sign language?
No, I have not. I used to
Okay.
know how to spell my name when I was younger.
Yeah.
But I have not. I never learned.
I think finger spelling is the hardest thing to do.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like much harder. And it's also kind of an evolving language. And if you don't stay abreast or involved with deaf, sometimes you get rusty. But I did teach it, and I had someone that interpreted for our worship teams for years, and had teams of girls that did that, and there was young girls that would do. It's considered competition, but they don't like to call it that, But I know that one of the girls that I trained has gone on to be, actually two have gone on to be they work professionally in deaf
As
studies.
interpreters?
Yes, and
Oh,
deaf,
wow,
deaf
that's
culture.
really
They
neat.
went to college for it, and that makes me really happy.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. A little impact
Excuse
here.
me.
That's pretty awesome. So one of the things that I have picked up on, and particularly, we all got an inside glimpse into your family in a pretty intimate way with the documentary that was made, and it
Yeah.
was done so well. But one of the things, I picked up on so many things that just made you even more intriguing to me. But the fact that you really intentionally worked hard to make sure that your boys were close, to nurture relationships that would keep them close and keep your family close. And how did you do that? Like, what is your advice when we're talking to young families about how you...
It's being intentional is probably the key word there. I cooked every meal. We had dinner together every night, and I would make breakfast, and we would sit together as a family every night. I mean, that was one thing that I'd like to point to, because even when Kevin and I started touring with the boys, because they were all minors when they first started touring, and we weren't going to break our family up, and we had Franklin, who was younger and who just adored his brothers, and so we went on tour with them.
Yeah.
And my husband was managing them, and he had partners in management that were very established in artist management, and that was really hard when you're on tour and you have a chef or a company that's providing for the tour, and you have to sit down in catering, with sound checks, and like your son just came in a few minutes ago, and he's got to have a sound check tonight. And
Exactly.
I mean, all those feelings, I just was like, oh my goodness.
I was thinking, as I was talking to him, I thought, she knows all of this language
yeah,
we're using
the
about
lingo.
what time sound check is, what time doors open. I'm like, you have been through all of that times 3 or 4.
Oh yes, yes. It's, then that was the hardest part, like just sitting down to eat again, and like that was like also being flexible, like we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
Like the part of me that was mothering and all the roles that I played, I had to like cycle out of that with them. Took a toll on my psyche, or just I had to really figure out, okay, that's not, it's not, they're not my purpose. And that's a woman, that's challenging. We need to find that our purpose is not just in these kids or our husband. We need to find things for ourselves that we need to realize that,
Right. Well, it would be easy, I would think, particularly for you to kind of get wrapped up in this identity of being the mother of the Jonas Brothers, as opposed to supporting them, loving them, but figuring out what your own passions are and what you want to be doing as a mom.
I mean, I
as a
loved
woman.
being that. And that's what I made a career out of. But I really I have a friend who always says to me, everything is seasonal, everything we do. And it's just like keeping that fresh on my mind. Yes, everything's seasonal and seasons change. And look here, I don't know about you in Nashville, but we've recently had opened a restaurant in Las Vegas. And we're like, is it always this cold this past winter? My husband's dying because he's freezing all the time. And it's like, we're in the desert. This is supposed to be warm. And everybody there says, this hasn't been this cold in 20 years. And, things change.
Yeah.
Like, I've seen it. Now I'm getting old enough now that I can see things.
The whole perspective changes, right? As we get in that. But that's something I've been thinking a lot about is seasons and kind of figuring out what's next. And it was part of the evolution of this podcast is figuring out how do I take, a career I've had in television and broadcasting, and then as I'm getting older, what does that look like? What do I do next? And to be able to tell these stories and relate to other moms who've walked.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
It's really a nice thing.
Yeah.
To have women being able to express. I think it helps moms like us who are mothers of talented children who are being exposed to the entire world, and the world is having a reaction to what has been ours for so long, and like being able to express it and talk to another person in kind really helps us, I think, as mothers process and realize, wow, this is really a beautiful thing that we're getting to experience. It's not, everyone else looks at it like, oh, how do you do this? And it's like, well, you just have to be flexible and
just life.
Do the next thing.
Yeah. I was thinking back to what you were talking about a minute ago, and I was thinking, I bet for you, because people would look at that outside life and say, oh, you had catering every night. Someone provided meals for your family. But as a mom, you miss just the intimate sitting down with your intimate or your immediate family and just enjoying dinner.
Yes.
Like some of those things that people see as glamorous are
right.
actually
absolutely.
the hard parts of it.
Yes, you're right. You're right about that. I've had a lot of lessons there too.
Yeah.
And I get kind of defensive when people will just say flippant things like, oh, they have people that do that for them, or blah blah blah. It's like, you don't really understand. And then I try not to take offense, because that's not wise, but maybe train them. I often had people come up to me during the boys' early days of touring and say, I'm just going to pray that your boys stay humble, and that you keep them down to earth. And I'd be like, why don't you pray that they would feel encouraged? And it would shock a lot of people. But it's like people think things that they shouldn't. And you're that mama part of you never leaves, I don't think.
That mama bear that lives inside
yes,
of us.
that defense mechanism, I think, that we're supposed to have for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you haven't experienced, you will.
Yeah, no, for sure. I was thinking, I had a conversation with someone the other day. How is he going to stay humble through all of this? How, and
it's not really your business, number one. And that's something you have to really come to grips with, because what are they going to think about you and how you've raised them? And listen, my boys have made a lot of choices that are different from choices I'll make, but they're adults.
Right.
I did the best that I could. I did what I thought was the right thing, as I'm sure you have. And I advise them when they ask, and I just have to love them.
Yeah. We have to trust the Lord with them.
Amen. I really, that's something I learned from a woman I love. I don't know if you've ever heard Elizabeth Elliot. She's gone on to be with the Lord now, but I think she would be my biggest mentor as a woman in that loves the Lord.
Is she an author?
She's an author. She was a speaker. I get so emotional just thinking about some of the things that she's taught me.
Right.
Just really valuable. Like, you raise your children and, you raise them in the way you think they should go. And when they're old, they'll return to it. They won't depart, but you've done the best you could.
We know the core of who they are. And the most important thing is that they know whose they are. I say that all the time.
Yes, that's really good. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did what we knew to do was right in the eyes of God. And, we really were probably wonderful mothers.
I'm going to go with yes, we are. We are, for sure. So one of the things I loved that I've heard your boys say is we weren't only allowed to sing at the dinner table. We were encouraged to sing. I love that.
That's so funny because I always remember hearing that. Don't sing at the dinner table. It's like,
why not?
Yeah. And it's like, I realized when I became, I have my own dinner table, I can do what I want.
Yeah.
And we're going to sing because my husband was always singing. He was always like, I learned quickly that we could not go out to eat anywhere there were lyrics playing because we couldn't have a date or an intimate conversation because he was always singing.
He was singing along.
He was singing along, and if he's not singing, he's playing along to the music. Is
he still like that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely still like that. But I love that part of him, and I think that because of that, our boys were encouraged. Yes, sing. Sometimes he would have to say, "Everybody stop talking." And I thought, we have boys, not girls. You know how always see TV or something that girls are like, "Ah, ah, ah, ah." But my boys were just like that too.
Yeah, just feeding off of each other. So much fun. So tell us, I know you've told this story so many times, but tell us about how an afternoon in the hair salon of having young Nick with you is really what catapulted everything.
Yes. Of course, my husband recognized very young, when he was 3, that he was very musical and had abilities.
Nick in particular?
Yes, Nick in particular. I think if I could say he sang before he talked, I would. We were in New Jersey. We were pastoring a church there, and it was a regular hair salon that I always went to, and I took my boys to, and the owners were people that attended our church. They were lovely. They had been, hairdressers to the stars and whatnot, but they always loved to hear Nick sing, and he was probably 5, maybe 6. Nick always wanted to work. This is another thing. Nick has the drive of his ambition is just astronomical. He never rests. He's always working. He would always do stuff to work. Like he would sweep and up all the hair, and then he would sing. And then the first time the owners heard him sing, and he's putting the hat out for everybody going around, and he kept singing and singing. And one day, another one of the owner's clients was there, and she said, she just stopped in her tracks and she said, "My son is an adult child performer on Broadway now. He was a child performer." And he said, she dug in her big purse, and somehow she found this tattered card of his manager, Shirley Grant. She gave me this card and she said, "You need to call this woman." And I just kind of tucked it away. And then, of course, I had to tell my husband about it when we got home because Nick was so excited and he pushed me and So we made an appointment to see this manager. And
how old was he at the time?
Nick was 6.
Okay.
And Nick was a petite child, like my husband was.
Mm-hmm.
He was not really large in stature, but that's always good in the entertainment industry. I learned later. However, he couldn't read, and everything was from memory. We went to see Shirley Grant. We finally made an appointment months later, and we went in, and he sang for her. She had 2 other people working for her. They were just completely blown away. And she actually made some calls while we were sitting there. And she's like, "They don't hire this young. And there's no parts available now on Broadway We were living in New Jersey. So this was New York.
You took him to New York to visit the agent.
No, she actually was in New Jersey, but she was a manager.
Okay.
So usually you'd have to have an agent to get this kind of audition for any of these roles. But she was one of the, she had been in the business so long. She had this wonderful, amazing relationship with all of the Broadway talent agents.
Okay.
And she was the only manager that could make those calls and get auditions. It was crazy. It was really crazy. So long story short, yeah, that's what catapulted it all. We eventually, she said, okay, go home. He's still too young. He needs to learn a few of these Broadway tunes, because he was singing like something from church, some worship song, and maybe like a pop Backstreet Boys song at the time, and he did all the dances. He knew everything. And so my husband was like, okay. So we did that, and we didn't talk about it. And oh my goodness. Then I got pregnant with my youngest, Franklin. And Nick just was like, he kept talking about it. I was sitting in the kitchen cooking, and he's at the table. And he's like, Mom, when are we going to go back and see that manager? I just knew that if we did, our life would be turned upside down. And it was. But it was good, you know.
Yeah. But you were a little bit hesitant. I mean, you had a young...
I was pregnant. I didn't even have my child yet.
Okay.
I didn't have this fourth baby.
Yeah.
And I went in there. We went in with Nick, and I was like 7 months pregnant. But my husband is also very smart. We took all of the boys. We took Joe and Kevin too, and we just had them sitting out there. And then she wanted to know, well, who are these other kids? So she says, let me have them come in here and read. And they just she had a little like commercial script that they read. And what I didn't know at the time is, like, you know, they need new talent in New York. And they all booked the very first thing that they auditioned for.
Oh, wow.
Nick didn't get cast on Broadway right away. He did a few commercials first. But Joe and Kevin, I was like juggling my pregnant body and getting, you know, these kids into New York City, learning how to do that, like either taking the train or the bus or driving.
You probably played a pretty big role in the church at the time, too, as
Absolutely.
a pastor's wife, right?
Yes, I did everything. I mean, I ran the women's ministry. I ran the sign language, you know, teams.
And you were driving these boys back and forth.
It was a really interesting, and we were not going to let it disrupt our life as pastors. Because they got a 2-for-1 deal, you know, with me and Kevin.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
You know, it was really crazy time, and we did that for 4 years.
Wow. So in the middle of that 4 years, he did get a big role on Broadway, which was probably multiple shows a week.
He got his first role when I was still pregnant for Franklin. Actually, he got it on his birthday, and then Franklin was born. So his birthday's the 16th. Frankie was born on the 28th of September. And then the rehearsals started in November, so I gave birth, and then his rehearsal started, and then it was it was at the Madison Square Garden. It was A Christmas Carol, and Frank Langella was starring as Scrooge in it, and it was like he met his people.
Did you just wrap up that newborn and take him to
yes, I had to. I took him into New York City in the snow, in the sleet. My husband got me a parking garage spot across the street from Madison Square Garden, and for that venue, they would allow us to come and stay like in the corridors. But parents aren't allowed in the theater. They're not allowed to, unless you buy a ticket. They're not. You have to drop your children. Here I am dropping my 8-year-old off at the door and leaving him in the hands of people I don't know for 3 hours. And cell phones were just a brand new thing. So, of course, we immediately get 2 cell phones, those Nokia, you know, those
flip phone or the big ones?
There was the big ones,
yes.
Those big ones. And he had one, and we had one. My husband and I traded off when we would drive in, you know.
Wow.
It was crazy. When I look back, Jennifer, I don't know how I did that.
And I'm going to guess you were making some pretty big financial sacrifices, too, that you probably weren't really able to do at that time.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was, you know, we put everything that Nick made and all the boys that they made away for them. We didn't take from them. The only thing that we actually had them pay for was the monthly parking of $220 in New York City, because you pay that in 2 days if you park in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, but it was a way that I felt like I'm not working. I don't have an outside job, the home job. I always worked part-time, like things during most of our marriage, but my husband really didn't. He really wanted me to be home with the boys.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm so fortunate. It's such a blessing.
What was the turning point for you to know, wow, this is getting big, fast, and our lives are about to change?
I didn't think it could get any bigger from that time on Broadway. I'm like, where is there to go from here? Because it was, eventually we had 2 children on Broadway. Joseph Adam, he also had booked something on Broadway, and to have 2 children in the same family hadn't happened in several years, and I didn't realize how small that community was.
I've heard other people say that.
Yes, it was really amazing. And all the while they're working and they're still doing other things, commercials, and they're still going on auditions. And
Were you homeschooling them?
no, I wasn't
How were you
homeschooling.
managing that?
I have to say they had wonderful. They were in a private school, which was also a financial sacrifice because it's even though it was in New Jersey, and our church was not a mega church, like in the Northeast, there were no. We grew from 100 to 1,000 over 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's considered a mega church.
Yeah.
Here in Nashville, like mega churches are, 20,000, 30,000 people. So I always thought, how can this go any bigger?
So at the time, you felt like that was the big time. You've got 2 kids on Broadway. You're juggling all of these things. And that felt big enough, right?
Absolutely. But I could stretch farther.
Apparently, you could stretch a whole lot farther.
I've learned that never say never, and don't say I could never do that, because God always gives you the grace for what He allows in your life. And that's something I learned from Elizabeth Elliot.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It kind of goes back to, I love the phrase that God gives us just enough light for the step we're on.
Oh, that's
And I think
nice.
it's such a beautiful visual of,
It is.
if it helps me to not get overwhelmed sometimes. I need just enough light for the stage that we're in, even though I know there's this really large staircase in front of us still yet to climb, especially at this very early stage. But He's so faithful to do that.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, the early stages, I think, are really hard because you don't know how to navigate.
Yeah.
And you really have to have faith and trust.
And what you were doing, though, again, I'll say it, anything that myself or the other moms who've sat on this couch with me, you were doing it at the same time, times 3, with a baby. You had a baby in the midst as all this was taking off.
Yes.
So that is, I feel like I overwhelm you when I say it out loud.
No, it's like, it's remarkable. I can't even imagine it now. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
I did that.
Yeah. And did such a good job at it. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I think that's really interesting perspective, though, that at the time you thought that was big but having no idea what was ahead. What was the shift into when they became the Jonas Brothers? I hate to skip some of the really good parts, but at some point, this became a thing of the 3 of them together in this entity of the Jonas Brothers.
Like my husband always says, like the big moment that when we knew something had shifted, it was when it was the Texas State Fair. They had already been touring, and they were represented by Columbia Records out of New York, and they were doing small things. They opened for Jesse McCartney for a while, and they did a bunch of little things. And but when they were on, they went to the Texas State Fair, and the roads were backed up for like 20 miles, and we could not get to the venue. I was not there. I was at home with Frankie, and I go between Frankie and Franklin because
I noticed you say Franklin and Joseph, and
yes, I do call them by their
Nicholas.
Yeah, they're Nicholas, and but Franklin's now an artist as well.
Yes. He's gone back to Franklin, though, right?
Yes, so he's gone back to Franklin, which I called him Franklin a lot.
Yeah.
But, everybody has their name for him, so forgive me for saying Frankie and Franklin. And then I stumble and say Frankly. But
we know which one. He's the baby.
He's a baby. He's really special. He's so special. And he's had it's special to be him. I can say that. But the Texas State Fair, 20 miles backed up, and my husband calls the promoter and says, "We cannot get there." And he's like, "You're going to get here. I'm sending a helicopter."
Did they?
They sent a helicopter.
Oh my goodness.
And I'm getting chills talking about it.
I've got
But
this visual in my head. So were you getting a phone call like you
my
would not
husband was like,
believe this
Denise, they're sending a helicopter because the guy, they said the traffic was backed up for them. He said, never has this happened in the history of the State Fair of Texas except for Garth Brooks.
Oh, wow.
And when you look at those pictures, you can pull them up online, and they actually had, girls were passing out and getting crushed because it was such a hot day that day. Oh. They were like, they had spraying them with water, like fire trucks. It was just unbelievable. Kevin called and said, it's shift. There's been a shift.
That's when you knew.
It's changed.
Wow. In the documentary, I don't think I'll ever forget it, but you're in Times Square. You're in the car.
Yes.
All of you are in the car. And I love that you guys have documented all of this. It's your reaction as mom that I was just like, cannot even imagine what she was feeling at the time. You're arriving to what was going on?
They were, their album was coming out at midnight, and they were releasing it at, what was the record store? Now it's escaping
Tower
me.
Records.
Yes, thank you. Tower Records was in Times Square. Mm-hmm. And we had been there a million times, going in between shows or when The Voice, and they were releasing their album at midnight after a show. They had a show that night. There was the traffic again. And my son Kevin was like, he's like, it's Jonas Brothers Christmas Eve, everyone. But I could not believe it was a sea. It was a sea of people.
The car could not even get down the street because everyone is just surrounded the car.
I was like in shock.
And you could tell.
20,000 people were there.
Yeah.
The police were angry with us. We had to.
Wasn't it, am I right? Maybe they had performed and then it was kind of a spontaneous announcement that they were going to do the Tower Records thing.
Yes, they were going to show up. It was a spontaneous announcement.
Yeah, and so it kind of panic ensued. But your reaction to seeing that, I watched that and I said, I wonder if that was a little bit of that shift of things will not be the same for our family. Mm-hmm. We're not going to be able to just go walk through the mall and do school clothes shopping.
No, it's very difficult. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's funny, and now we're not even, since the boys have made their comeback, mm-hmm. I never expected this to happen, but people, we get stopped just when we're the two of us. It's very strange.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Mama Jonas and Papa Jonas. It's a thing.
I think because we've been, they're so good with their fans. And
people are so interested in family and getting a glimpse of who people are and realizing, oh, you have a mom and a dad just like we do. Your mom, your mom cooks Sunday supper just like mama. Some of the normalcies that we love to hear about. While there are a lot of advantages and wonderful things, also just trying to keep things as basic as you can.
Yeah. Because I think that the artists work hard. Mm-hmm. They work hard. It was so refreshing to see your son come through the door and be just, hey, Mom.
He walked in. He did not realize we were recording. It was just like, oh, okay. I'm like, guess what? You get to meet Mrs. Jonas. It was a bonus for sure. You mentioned the getting back together. Mm-hmm. So tell me, as a mom, am I right? They split for about 6 years to do their own things. Mm-hmm. How did you navigate that? How hard was that as a family? And how did you encourage each one of them individually?
It was very hard.
Did it happen gradually? Was it something, or was it a kind of a?
No, everyone has their own truth, their own version. And as parents, you see some things differently. And there were some things about it that were really a shock and painful. And I know they've discussed that. But for us, too, there's you see when your children have difficulties and they aren't, maybe they're not getting along or they have conflict, it hurts us, I think, as parents, and we can't fix it. When they're young, we can, sit them down and talk to them and try to train them in how to conflict resolution. That's something that we did. My husband was really, we always tried to teach them conflict resolution. not that we'd always do it greatly ourselves,
but give them some skills.
Yes,
to
we
help
tried to give them skills.
Yeah.
And tried to, we decided that one day we're raising adults. We're not raising children. We're raising leaders, and we're raising husbands and fathers. So, then when they're getting married now, and that's a whole nother, I think for anyone, that adds another layer of something they have to navigate through. And but during that time, to answer your question, when they broke up, and I think just individually encouraging them each in their own pursuit of what they're going to do now, what steps. I love that they have a really very strong bond and relationship with my husband, their father. And sometimes I think, well, it doesn't matter to me if they ask me things, because I really think that he's the wise one. He's the head of the household, and he has wisdom that he can impart to them. They would, there's things that they would speak to me about, and still do call me about, but they're different than what they talk to my husband about. And I know that his skills are better than mine in some areas, especially in that area. But I just tried to be encouraging to them in their gifts outside of each other. I think they figured it out. They figured it out, and they're back together now, and they're on top of the world, really.
Do you think that time apart helped them to grow to appreciate each other's strengths more and realize?
I believe that did. I think that you're right about that. That I think it did help them. And they matured during that time. They grew up a little bit. Yeah. They had to. They all started this before they were, even 20, and it's what they wanted to do. They pushed for it.
Did the band breaking up, I guess we'll just use that term.
Sure.
Did the band breaking up impact the family in a really deep, difficult way?
Yes, it did.
You and your husband, y'all's relationship, and trying to bring some unity together in the family?
Yeah, it did in ways that, we really had to be careful about time spent or holidays or events together, because it was really raw for the first year or so for everyone.
So Christmas wasn't normal, birthdays weren't normal,
Yeah,
things like that for a little while.
Yeah, exactly. And it impacted a lot of areas financially, for all of them and for all of us, because my husband was managing them at the time, and we all had to navigate, and it was hard on their little brother, Franklin, because it's hard for him to understand why are they breaking up, and this is what they are, and they're my favorite, and why is this happening, and I'm displaced now,
Describe the healing for me, though. Describe what it meant to see your family whole again.
So really, my heart just leapt, And now I'd like to share this little. So they were recently in Las Vegas performing. They had a residency there, and they had their daughters with them, and during sound check, so watching them being fathers now, and then carrying their daughter around. Both Joe and Nick had their kids there, and it was just amazing to see, wow, they're getting it. They're experiencing this now with their own, and they're not like these young. They're men, I mean, they're fathers.
Yeah.
It's
kind of thinking outside of themselves.
Absolutely.
Connor talks a lot about how it's such a self-centered business because everyone's focus is on you, and that sometimes it's hard not to, all everybody does is talk about you and your business all day, and every meeting you go to or whatever, everything's focused about you. And so it's hard to kind of stop and think outside of yourself. It sounds like maybe that's what becoming a father has done for them. And again, maybe to even see through a lens that may be similar to what you see through as a parent.
You're so wise. You're so wise. I think as a parent, all the years that you and your husband probably have, you didn't realize how much you've just piled on that, you've given of yourself. And then seeing them now doing that, it's just, you just sit back and go, okay, this is why. Now they're doing it.
Yeah.
But they couldn't have done it without you. It gives you such satisfaction and not in just, I feel like that's the way the Lord looks at us, you know. He loves us. He created us a certain way because he loved us, and he wants us to worship him and love him with those things that he created us with. And when we do those things, we're showing him that love. We just have, you know, when our kids are in their element and they're doing those things, and when they're making decisions and choices that we know that we've taught them, perhaps, not that we're, you know, anything, because I just live my life by grace every day and by the mercy of God, because I couldn't do it.
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. I think about all of these opportunities or proud moments that you must have, and their stage just keeps getting bigger and bigger. The halftime show for the Thanksgiving game for the Cowboy Stadium.
I was so sick. I was so looking forward to Thanksgiving.
Did you not get to go?
No, I couldn't go but that's they had done the halftime show years ago, and honestly, that was my favorite Thanksgiving. I love Thanksgiving. And I love the sound of football in the back. I couldn't tell you how the game works. I know there's a quarterback, and I understand, you know.
You love the atmosphere.
Yes, I do. And I love hearing the guys like yelling and excited, and my husband. So going to the Cowboys halftime show one time when they performed many years ago, was my most favorite event.
So you were looking so forward to it.
I was so excited to go. I'm like, I'm going to this. And I had been traveling a lot back and forth, and I got really sick, and I was grounded by my doctor.
Uh-oh.
And it was okay, but you know.
This year alone, though, I think about, of course, their career has spanned for so many years now, but you've had the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Did you get to be there for that?
I was there, yeah.
That's special.
Yes,
and the grandgirls were there for that as well, right?
Yes, that was wonderful. Watching my granddaughter, though, I gave her my phone. I said, Alina, you know, just take my phone, and she's like, I've got to take pictures because no one's going to believe this. She actually went back and did a full presentation to her class.
Oh, adorable.
The way that those kids know how to do things, it's like, you are incredible.
Yeah.
Can you do my PowerPoint presentation?
Program my computer.
Yeah. Program. Exactly. That was really fun to see their proud faces.
Yeah.
It was really special.
Did you just go to every night of the little residency that they did, where they did a different album every?
No, I didn't get to go to that either, which is
everyone thinks at so much.
Everyone thinks, yeah, I'm at everything, and I have my own life. I have to do things, but I would like to be there all the time.
Yeah.
And they expect us to be there. You know, they just and they welcome us. But my husband actually was in New York for 2 of the shows. He said it was just fantastic, and it was really special because it was in the Marquee Theater, which is where Nick did his. Where we had our parking spot for 4 years in New York City.
Yes.
At the Marquee. We had our and Nick did Annie Get Your Gun There with Reba McEntire and Crystal Bernard. He did the final run of that for about almost a year.
I saw Crystal Bernard in that show so many years ago, and I can't help but wonder if Nick was in that version that I saw.
Oh yes,
I mean,
she was.
Assume that he was, and I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And he worked every night.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
you asked that number about earlier. Yes, like 8 shows a week.
Oh my goodness.
6 days a week.
That you were driving him back and forth for. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yep.
That's
crazy.
crazy.
But yeah, they just did announce that they're going to do Yankee Stadium.
I saw that.
That is a dream. I mean, I'm so and one of them sent me a picture of their daughter today in a little Yankees t-shirt. They sent the whole family, and it's like, oh. But when I heard that made me really proud.
Oh, that
is
is
really exciting. Yeah,
that's really
I hope I'll be there for that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's busy summer. I'm just looking at the calendar going, oh my goodness, so many places to be.
What does your family group text look like? Is it active?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What is it called? I shouldn't say it out loud because if somebody hacks.
Oh, no. Yeah, I was like, oh, yeah, what is it called? That's interesting.
Yeah. It's funny because they have family groups, you know, for their spouses too.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, first time I realized that, I was like, oh, yeah, of course. I have to say that they all have, I mean, I love all my goddaughters-in-law and their parents, all of their parents I feel that we have a really good relationship with each of them. They're really good people.
And it's so important
So
that that's a
thankful.
good relationship. You have the
Yeah.
most beautiful daughter-in-laws.
And they're inside and out. They are really, I mean, they are remarkably beautiful in person. Oh my goodness. But they are such lovely women. They are. And
Couldn't
they
ask for
love,
much
yeah.
more than that, right?
Yes, I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful. And I'm really thankful that I have such an amazing husband and it's just he and I now. I mean,
Are you loving this stage of life?
yes, I am. I'm really, and things are really, really busy. My husband's he's a colon cancer survivor, and he just had his 5 year. Like they absolutely could say cancer free before that 5 year
That's
mark.
amazing.
They have to say no disease detected, and he just had that this last month in New York. He's back to himself, and even with even more vigor, it seems. And I'm so happy for him, and just want to be a big support to him in that in any way I can.
Yeah. Well, you've been so sweet to talk about you had a health scare yourself, and you have not really talked much about that.
No, I actually haven't talked about it publicly. I don't think at all.
When we first, of course, you and I have been talking about doing this together
Yeah.
for months, and we finally made it happen. But one of the things that you said to me is you said, just so you know, I have a little bit of a speech issue, which, by the way, I do not hear today at all. So praise the Lord, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And you've been so welcoming and you've made it so easy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I first want to thank you because I appreciate you trusting me with your story and sharing it. But you had a stroke.
I had a stroke.
How long ago has it been?
In May it will actually be 5 years, which I can't believe it's been that long.
Wow.
And it was what you call a basal ganglia. It was in the basal ganglia area of my brain, which affected my cognitive thinking and my speech, reasoning. And at certain times I have difficulty, like I said, with my speech. Sometimes if I'm tired or if I'm hungry, I can fumble my words around and not think of right words. And sometimes, like I said earlier, I can't remember if it was this or that because I really can't. And although, I had a health scare, I always say it was probably the best thing that happened to me. And I feel like it was a gift. It was a gift from the Lord. I don't think that most people say that about something, but it caused me to really be still. And I'm
Something
learning.
you're probably not naturally very good at.
No, I
And it's definitely not how you guys lead your life. I mean, you're on the go all
No.
the time.
and that's the challenge too now, like doing things. It's harder now for me to be like in the moment and be spontaneous.
Are you more cautious to pick and choose what you're going to do and what the physical toll of that may be?
Yeah, the physical and like, your aphasia is something that happens. Like my brain gets tired, and I know when I'm tired, and I can't do it any longer, or I can't talk any longer. To people. We've talked about this, that we own 2 restaurants. They're named the same, and sometimes I just know I can't go up there and be chatty with.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a major
Folks.
social aspect to being a restaurant owner.
Social activity is difficult now for me. I was always like, oh, my husband depended on me for it, and it was my strength and my superpower. And the first time I tried to cook after I had come home I was in 6 weeks of speech therapy, and you don't realize how much speech therapy covers, like writing a check, writing.
Yeah, so much more
solving.
than spoken word, right?
It is. I mean, I couldn't speak. That was the biggest thing. I couldn't talk. I couldn't remember my middle name, my social
What
security
exactly
number.
happened? Tell me the circumstance behind. Were you at home? Were you traveling? And did you have any prior symptoms?
Well, I did have prior symptoms, but I didn't realize it. I was at home. The symptoms that I had were that my blood pressure had been high. I had gone to 3 different doctors over the course of like 6 months prior. I had been to my dentist where they take my blood pressure. I'd been to my gynecologist where they took my blood pressure. And then I was just a general practitioner because we had recently relocated to our house in North Carolina where we opened our restaurant. So I had to find new doctors. of course, my dentist was in Texas. And I had these other 2 new doctors. So, when you're meeting a new doctor, but
Do all the basics.
my blood pressure had been very high at all of them. And they actually took my blood pressure a second time at the gynecologist's office because that was the one just closest to my stroke happening. And when I left, it was better. I didn't think anything of it, really.
Right.
I just didn't really think anything of it because I'm young. I mean, I'm not.
And you didn't really feel any different,
No,
right?
I didn't feel any different. I really started on a Saturday. I was very agitated in the afternoon. It was Cinco de Mayo, and it was the Kentucky Derby. I know this. And I got really agitated that afternoon, and I don't know why. And it went to bed, and I woke up during the night, and I woke up feeling like my arms were weird. That's the only way. It's terrible. It's the only way I could describe it. And so I put a sweater on. I thought maybe something's. I felt like I had restless arm syndrome. I didn't even know if that was a thing. I don't think it is, but I kind of woke up and looked that up. But I also woke up and had the hiccups, which I've come to learn that is it's like the most missed symptom in women of a stroke happening.
I have never heard that, ever.
And you won't hear about it a lot. But when I Googled it, it was the first thing that came up.
Wow.
It's crazy.
It's crazy what we can learn on the internet.
I know, it is crazy, but...
Did you Google it that morning thinking, my arms feel weird, I've got the hiccups, which you must not have ever had very often?
It was like 3:30 in the morning. I woke up and had the hiccups. Like, yes, I rarely get the hiccups.
But that is an odd
But waking
time.
up to it was just strange. And then when I had gotten up then to go to the restroom, and I had a glass of water next to the sink, and I was trying to get the glass of water, and I couldn't, the movement wouldn't happen.
You could not tell your hand to reach for
I was
and
telling
pick
my
up the water.
hand, but my hand wasn't listening to my brain.
Oh.
It was terrible. I just was like, I just gave up and thought, maybe I'm just too tired.
It's 3:30 in the morning. I mean, yeah.
And I had some tequila the day before because it was Cinco de Mayo. So, but yeah, it's in the morning. And then I got up in the morning. My husband always brings me coffee. He brings me my coffee every morning, and I drink it there sitting in bed. And it was Sunday morning, and we always have this time on Sunday morning where he sits in his chair beside the bed, and I'm sitting there, and we kind of, it's like really a deep time for us. I was he was going to the restaurant for our brunch, and I was going to church to join his mom at church, and I started having trouble speaking and talking to him, and I said, I can't really make sentences. He said, it's early. Maybe you just need another cup of coffee. And I never have 2 cups of coffee. But I had Googled and I didn't tell him. And I said, what if it's something worse, more serious? Well, it took me forever to put my makeup on. It took me forever to get dressed. I got to church late. And I knew that the first person I spoke to, I knew it wasn't making sense. The way she looked at me, I thought, I am not making any sense.
So you were aware that your words weren't.
Yes.
Wow.
And then I sat down and I was trying to stand up and sing and trying to do, and my mother-in-law kept looking at me and I said, I'm not making sense, am I? She's like, no.
Had you driven to church that morning?
I drove myself, which was another terrible thing. I drove myself to church. I don't know how I did it.
Wow.
But she said, I said, I think I'm having a stroke. I whispered. She's like, no, honey, you're probably just having a nervous breakdown. I don't know what that is, but you're probably just having one. I was like, and I had a friend on the other side of the church, and she was looking at me, and she said to me after, like, I was completely slumped over in that pew. Now, I don't even remember that I was slumped over. And I said, why didn't you come over? She's like, well, your mother-in-law was there. I didn't want to interrupt.
But she noticed that something from across the church.
Yeah.
Wow.
So eventually, my mother-in-law, she got me out of the church, and we called my husband, and he had to come get me.
So they did some type of scan, realized that you had had a stroke, I would assume.
Yeah, they actually immediately gave me that. I don't actually know what the drug is called. There's some kind of, it stops it from happening.
So they knew pretty quickly
I could
that
just
this is
tell.
what you were dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then I wore a heart monitor. They put it inside my chest. They didn't know why. They were all saying, you're very peculiar. You're only 52. This is unusual.
Yeah.
You know, there's no symptoms. You don't have heart problems. You know, so they didn't know, and they did, exploratory precautions for several years. I've since had that little heart monitor removed.
Is it something that got better over time? That
Yeah,
your
it
speech
gets
and
better. And like I said, there are times when it's very hard to explain, but it's almost like I can feel my brain. I know that sounds so crazy, but there's no other way to describe it. It's just like I feel it in my head, and I know when it can't go on anymore. It just kicks in, and you just can't do anything else. I just have to stop what I'm doing. I just can't go
you
on.
take care of yourself. Yeah.
And that's what I'm thankful for. I'm thankful that I know my body, and I understand what things I should and shouldn't do. And I know how to say no, because I never knew how to say no before.
Don't you think that's one of the things that comes with age too? A little bit of that wisdom of maybe not being as much of a people pleaser or caring as much about people's opinions when
Yes.
you know how you feel about something.
Yeah, it's with being a pastor's wife, in that light, and
I know that was hard.
living our life. We always tell our children, like, we don't do this because you're the pastor's kids or we're the pastor's family.
Yeah.
We do this because we're Christians. So but I also think all of that prepared us for prepared them too for the world they live in. But like like you and I were discussing, like someone says, oh, I'm just going to pray they stay humble. It's like, I don't really care. And what you think doesn't really matter. And that's not to be mean or mean-spirited or evil, but learning that as a more mature woman really is freeing.
Maybe it would have affected you more when you were younger to be worried more
did.
about what everyone thought,
It did.
or when your child makes a decision that's not your choice and how it reflects on you. And at some point you have to separate yourself from that. Yeah, that's a tough one for sure.
It is tough.
You said that when you had your stroke, it forced you to be still, but that during that time you never felt closer to the Lord.
And even still, I think because I learned to be quiet. Like I'm always thinking. My mind's always going. There's always something to do.
Yeah.
I'm a very driven person. I had to stop. And stopping and being silent is something I didn't like silence. There's always music going in my home, always something
I'm the
happening.
same way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just when I do things, like now I can cook and just pray.
Yeah.
And just hear the voice of God, and just meditate on scriptures that I've learned over the years and that I've memorized maybe, and really, for the first time, this is going to sound terrible. I'm just going to tell you this. It's a confession, okay? For the first time, I actually read the Bible through.
Wow, I'm doing it this year, and I've never even attempted to be honest.
I'm a student that went to Bible college. I was a pastor's wife, but I'd never read it through.
Wow.
And after I had my stroke for the first time, and it was like, I learned so much, and things I would have never. I've seen things in different ways that I've never. I would talk to my husband. I'm like, have you ever looked at it like this? He's like, no. So, I can't wait to do it again now because, I'm sure you're experiencing it and that you're doing it now. And it doesn't matter how long it takes you. And I didn't I thought I was going to do it in 30 days.
Oh my goodness. Boy, that was a big goal.
Accomplishment to think about. But it took me longer than I thought it would, and that's okay.
Yeah, just do it at your own pace.
It took me.
To me, I feel like it's been more of, I've always been kind of a devotional girl and, looking for my little nuggets of encouragement
for the day,
here and there. What's going to get me through today? And I still love those. But to dedicate myself to, I'm doing the Bible recap is an app I'm using, which I listen and then I read and write notes and that type of thing in it. What it's done for me, I think, is I feel proud of a sense of obedience to be in the Word every day. I think that's what I'm most proud of myself for, is I'm literally doing it every day. Now, sometimes I'm crawling into bed and just kind of like hoping I don't fall asleep while I'm listening or reading.
Yeah, I listen
and
too,
whatever.
because reading was hard, and it can still be hard. But I listen, and I feel like
yeah, it's helped my understanding. I
It
do good
does.
with
I do that.
the audio portion. I love that you did that. I bet you were so proud of yourself when you got to the end.
You know who was really proud of me? Was my youngest, Franklin.
Really?
He was so proud of me, and I was just that really made me really happy that he was so proud of me.
What is it about our kids telling us that they're proud of
I
us, which is very flipping the script? But what is it? Like Connor's words to me when I started this podcast, he listened to the very first episode that we did, and he sent me a text about the fact that he was proud of me for stepping out to do this, and I saved it. Like, I screenshot it, I saved it, and I don't know why, but there's something about your kids saying, "I'm proud of you, Mom," that is so powerful.
I wish I knew the answer, but I'm going to meditate on that. That's really,
it's so
that's
true.
really, that's a golden nugget right there.
Yeah, oh yeah, it is. Talk about nuggets. Yeah. Tell me about life now. You guys have
Oh,
Nellie's
goodness.
Southern Kitchen.
Oh, I can't wait for you to come visit one of
know.
our locations.
I want to. So
if you're ever in
badly.
North Carolina and Charlotte area, or out in Vegas,
We're doing it. We're doing
They're
it.
they're both they're named after my husband's grandmother, Nellie.
And these are her recipes, right?
Quite a few of them, and it's her recipes, and it's her hospitality. What her life was based on, really.
Did you get to know her?
Oh gosh, her birthday was the day before mine, and I got to know her. She was a sweet. Let me tell you, she was just a sweet woman. She worked her entire life in the cotton mill in the town of Belmont, and she would come home and she would change into her house dress, and she'd put dinner on the table. She'd cook. She made the best biscuits and gravy, the best chicken and dumplings. That recipe is hers.
Oh, yum.
And
now, why the restaurant? Did you ever see yourself doing
no,
something like that?
No, I think I now sometimes we say, I think it was a
You had a weak moment, basically.
Yeah, it was. Well, my husband bought the property first, and in the town where he grew up in, and he just thought, he saw that the town was booming and Charlotte was moving west, and he knew that this would be a valuable piece of property. We didn't know what we were going to do with it, and then the recession hit the family pretty hard, and he really was trying to help his family with opening this restaurant. I said, well, maybe we should open a restaurant and name it after your grandmother, and because the young women, and now young men as well, but the younger generation, they don't cook.
Right.
They don't cook anymore, and these recipes are getting lost. They're not being handed down. Like, his mother knows how to cook, and I noticed that his sister didn't cook, and her daughters didn't cook, and they all wanted to have grandma's corn, but nobody knows how to cook them.
Right. So, but it sounds like you and Kevin are very hands-on in the restaurant. It's not like allowing someone to use the family name and go, because that's a big thing on Broadway down here, is you've got all the restaurants with the artists' names on them,
Right.
but it's not like they're formulating the menu.
Right.
You guys are
Yeah.
pretty hands-on.
We are. We are. And that I don't go in the kitchen and cook. But I do advise on certain things. I do have one recipe on the menu, but I need to go back in and help fix it. I think because things get changed and different chefs do things differently.
Yeah.
And even if they have a guidebook, everyone's different. But the fact that we have a second one in Las Vegas, it's a tough market out there.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Very tough. We've incorporated the whole family singing thing into our restaurants. We have live music in the evenings and on Sundays. Not just our family, but we have local talent coming in, and it makes for a great atmosphere.
That's
and
so fun.
they get dinner and a show basically, and for the same price you would go down the street and not get a show.
I love it. Oh, I can't wait to get to visit.
And people love comfort food.
Oh, for sure. So you've got one in Vegas and then one in North Carolina,
Yes.
which is near where you guys live, right?
Yes.
Okay. What would you say that your boys got from their mama?
Oh, okay.
I was trying to decide who favored you the most, and we've decided somewhere between Nick and Joe, right?
Yeah, and I see myself in all of them, and like poor Kevin, he gets some of my little stubbornness, and my I think Nick, he's very hospitable, gets the hospitality. Joe is so sensitive. Joe just feels everyone's heart and emotions. And Franklin he's an encourager. I'd say he really is an encourager. And I think they all are inclusive. That's one big thing that I always have felt is very important, to be inclusive of others. And I'm proud of all of them.
I know you are, yes,
Yeah.
and you should be. What a journey that your whole family has gotten to experience because of the gifts that your boys have been given. That's incredible. So,
Yeah, you're so sweet. Thank you.
thank you.
And
Thank you for being here. I hope we get to stay friends. This has been so fun.
yes, absolutely. And I just wish you the best on your journey and your son's journey. Just loving him and being there. I heard you do earlier today. I watched you be that support. That's in sign language, a support, and it's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. It's a privilege for sure. Thank you so much.